Okay, Chairman, I think it's 7 o'clock and we're live streaming. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, welcome everybody to this evening's meeting of the Audit and Governance Committee. I'm sure we're definitely quorate, and I'd like to move to the agenda straight away. And item 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence.
Yes, Chairman, we've got apologies from Councillor Huggins.
Thank you. Item 2 is Chairman's announcements. I haven't really got any announcements except to read out the usual preface to these meetings, which involves the current climate, and I can read as follows. The local authorities and police and crime panels coronavirus flexibility of local authority and police and crime panel meetings, England and Wales regulations 2020, came into force on Saturday the 4th of April 2020 to enable councils to hold remote committee meetings during the COVID-19 pandemic period. This was to ensure local authorities could conduct business during this current public health emergency. This meeting of the Audit and Governance Committee is being held remotely under these regulations via the Zoom application and is being recorded and live streamed on YouTube. Thank you. Okay, so that brings us on to item 3, which is the minutes of the last meeting of the committee, which was held on the 10th of February, and they begin on page 17 of the meeting pack. Are members happy that they represent a correct record?
Happy to propose that, Chairman.
Oh, thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Councillor Wood. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Alder is a seconding. Thank you very much indeed. All those in favour? Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Lots of hands appearing there. Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. I know, William, you very kindly sent around some follow-ups, wouldn't you, on the matters arising after the last time's meeting, which I think will help. I think Councillor Alder, I think you'd raised a question in particular. I think you've got a reply that way. That was, you were happy with that. You're on mute, Councillor Alder.
Yes, I'm very happy, and I thought it was a very full response, and thank you very much indeed.
Brilliant.
Very good of you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you much indeed for that. I wonder if I might just ask about under work programme. Last time we talked about sort of further scrutiny training would be rolled out following the review of from the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny. I just wondered, I don't know whether who would deal with this, whether there's any these plans have been sort of developed any further about the sorts of training that might be considered.
Yeah, Chairman, if I can just jump in there.
Yeah.
I have been investigating some further scrutiny training, and we have had quotations which are bespoke, which would address some of the issues that came out of the review. And that issue is on the OS agenda on the 23rd. There have been some discussions with the leader and Councillor Rutland Barsby, who supports member development, and it's just been left with the leader for the moment before we take it further, because there may be some changes in the memberships of both committees, so it would seem to be more productive if this was delayed until we actually know who's on those particular committees, so that those particular individuals can be focused for that particular training.
Okay, thank you. Smashing. Thanks very much indeed.
Okay.
And if anyone else has got anything else to add, if not, can't see that there is, we can move on to the next item, if that's okay, which is declarations of interest. I'm not aware of any, but if anyone hasn't got it just now, if they think if anything comes to mind later in the meeting, then please do let us know. Smashing. Okay, thank you. So then we get into the meat of the meeting, item 5, which is a shared anti-fraud service. And the papers for this section begin on page 15 of the pack.
Good evening, Chair.
Evening, hello. How are you?
Oh, yeah, very well, thank you.
Good.
So for those who don't know, I'm Nick Jennings. I work for the Shared Anti-Fraud Service. It's a shared service the council was a founding member of back in 2015. And tonight you're getting two reports for the price of one. You're asked to approve the council's. Sorry, Chair.
There's a bargain, I said.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Indeed, it is. It is.
Yeah, you are. You say, yeah.
So you're asked to approve the council's anti-fraud plan for next year for 21-22, and secondly to note the work undertaken by the council and the Shared Anti-Fraud Service to protect the council against the risk of fraud and corruption in the current year. So the report is split in two. Just very briefly talking about Shared Anti-Fraud Service. We provide a variety of functions for the council, from helping to develop policies and processes to deter and prevent fraud, providing fraud awareness training for staff and members, promoting the use of data and data analytics to prevent and identify fraud, issues around public and internal communications, again to help us try and deter fraud. And finally, we undertake the investigation and prosecution of fraud where our other defences haven't worked. And on top of that, we also develop an anti-fraud plan for the authority each year. And members can find the proposed plan for next year at page 21 of your bundles. I'm going to assume that members have had the opportunity to read through that, so I'm not going to go into that in a great deal of detail. What I will say is that the plan for next year takes into account the latest best practice, guidance and recommendations from MHCLG, SIPFA, National Audit Office and others. The plan also includes the Fighting Fraud and Corruption Locally checklist, that doesn't slip off the tongue easily, from the National Strategy for Combating Fraud across local government. And the strategy was delivered in 2020 as a partnership between the Local Government Association, SOLIS, SIPFA, CIFAS, external auditors and practitioners from across the sector as well. And the checklist in particular will allow us to see how well the council is doing in meeting the counter-fraud standards laid out in the strategy. So we continue to see a focus on acknowledge, prevent, pursue, which we've seen for some years now in similar strategies. And for 2020, we've added 2 additional themes to that around governance and protect. So protect is an overarching theme to protect the authority, protect your customers, protect staff as well. And governance just ramps up a little bit around acknowledgement. So acknowledging that there is a fraud risk is great, but actually ensuring that we do things to prevent and deter fraud happening is equally important. So they're 2 new themes that we've seen in the strategy this year, and they've been incorporated into the plan that we've developed. And we're reporting back to senior officers and this committee during the year. It's also likely that the chair of the committee will have a role in ensuring that the council has the right levels of resource, skills and knowledge to protect itself against fraud and corruption. As a public document, we always keep the anti-fraud plan quite brief, so we don't want to give too much away about what we're doing at the council to prevent fraud happening, but we will provide in this committee with updates on actual work undertaken during the course of the year. So I commend the plan to you, Chairman. Just finally, touching on the second part, the main body of my report at page 18, and onwards from there, we briefly mentioned the levels of reported fraud for East Herts Council and some of the outcomes from this in the current year for 2021. And then my report finishes off about talking about the success the council has had in ensuring its compliance with the requirements of the Cabinet Office National Fraud Initiative in October 2020. And we are now working closely with officers across the council to resolve the output from that activity, which we received last month, and we hope to have fully resolved by the early summer. Chairman, at that point, I'm more than happy to take questions from members.
Thank you. Smashing. Are there any questions at this point? I'd like to ask then, so on table 2, which is who is reporting fraud, I haven't got a page number, I'm afraid. It's sort of paragraph 4.3. It's the orange bar chart. Chairman. Pardon?
Yes, I think it's page 19.
Page 19. Sorry, the version I've got. I printed a copy off. Shame on me. And the version I printed off doesn't have page numbers on it. I'm sorry, I wasn't going to admit that. So the bar chart there, we've got obviously the main sort of sources, if you like, of fraud reporting as staff and public. Then the 2 smaller ones are one's proactive and one's other. I wonder if you might just give us a bit more, sort of a bit more colour about what sort of who would be in those 2 buckets, as it were.
Proactive, Chair, is where we are undertaking data analytics and we've identified potential fraud for investigation. So that might be as part of the National Fraud Initiative, or it could be part of local data matching, data analytics that we're working on with the council. So that doesn't always, it quite often produces a lot of work, but not many cases for investigation. So we only record the cases which we actually pass on for investigation. and other is where we receive the referral from another source. So it might be, as I mentioned there, either from the police or from the Department for Work and Pensions when they've reported something for the council to investigate.
Thank you. Thank you. And para 4.5, just below that, it talks about there are 11 sort of live investigations, or sorry, 11 investigations that were closed during the year and produced fraud loss savings in excess of 26,000. Forgive me if I've missed this, but how are we in terms of sort of generating these fraud loss savings in sort of to mitigate the cost of us sort of being a member of the, you know, because what we normally try and do, don't we? We normally identify, we want enough fraud loss savings to kind of pay, to wash its own face, if you like. And how are we doing with in terms of sort of getting money in or making savings or whatever?
Yeah, Chairman, I think it's fair to say this year that things have been a bit strange. We've a lot of our work has been delayed. We do a lot of work, obviously, because the amount of housing benefit that's fraud that's reported to us. We work very closely with the Department for Work and Pensions. We haven't been able to interview people face to face for obvious reasons. So we're at the minute we've built up a backlog of work which we're trying to deal with now, and we've got several strategies in place to pick those up. You will see in the previous paragraph of 4.4 that we've got around 21 cases that are live and under investigation at the moment, where the estimated fraud losses or savings could be in excess of £250,000.
Yeah.
So we've sort of chipped away at some of the smaller cases to get them cleared where we can, and we've just built up this reserve of work, which we will move on as quickly as we can once we're able to interview people, once we're able to joint work again with the Department for Work and Pensions. So there's a stock of work there. So this year, in the past, we've had financial targets to achieve. We haven't got that this year, which might be quite fortunate as a KPI, I suppose. But we would offer up the fact that it's been a strange year. And a lot of our work has actually been working with officers to try and prevent fraud happening around the response to COVID. So where we're dealing with business grants, making sure that the process in place actually prevents a fraud occurring. And obviously, if we prevent something happening, we don't really know what we've been able to prevent. So it's quite hard to put value on that.
Yeah. I guess that kind of begs the obvious question, is that obviously you've got a bit of inevitably there's a backlog sort of developing. Yeah, we're looking for an assurance that you're going to make sure you catch everybody, and all the backlog is dealt with properly, so thoroughly and all that sort of thing. You're not going to be overwhelmed and people are going to get fall down the cracks, all that sort of thing.
No, I think we've got very good support from the board. I mean, Stephen was at the staff's board meeting last week, and very good. We've got the right resources.
I think we might have lost Nick.
Yeah, seems like he might be having a connection issue.
Sorry, Chair. I think I've just lost you. Yeah, can you hear me now, Chair?
Yes. Is it worth going on to?
Yeah, I think.
I wonder if is it worth just
switch
going
my
on
video off. Just
turn the video off. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll take the video off. Yeah, there we go. Hopefully that'll be a bit better.
You're muted now, Nick.
Yeah, Chair, did you pick up the last point that I was making there about the board supporting the service into the new year, ensuring that we've got the right resources in place?
I think we didn't. I think you just told us. I think we've got it now. Then I think we're all right.
Yeah, good. Okay.
So actually, okay, that was, yeah. I guess that kind of was kind of the obvious question to ask, I suppose. And then just moving on to the second of the two reports, which I thought was very good, very full, very informative. And we've got the sort of into the appendices. In the prevent section, again, I'm off Appendix A. Apologies, I haven't got a page number.
Yes.
It talks about item 15. It talks about an independent and up-to-date whistleblowing policy, which is monitored for take-up and can show that suspicions have been acted upon. Is this the council's whistleblowing policy you're referring to here?
Yes, yeah, all of these things, Chair, will be they're all there as recommendations within the strategy to ensure that the council is doing what it can to as certainly that section to prevent fraud happening. So the council does have a whistleblowing policy. I think probably Stephen and James can probably give you a bit more information on the whistleblowing policy itself. But what we'll be doing is looking at where that policy is situated and the accessibility, where the staff are aware of it and are able to use the reporting process that the council has in place. So it's to make sure that you've got something and that it actually works.
Yeah, on the subject of whistleblowing, I was just wondering, and it's maybe one for James perhaps, is how often the whistleblowing policy is reviewed and by who? I don't know whether that's more for James than for you, Nick, maybe.
Yeah, we did actually go through the process not long ago of looking at all of the policies that the council currently has and when they need to be looked at. It'll just take me a minute to pull that up, but so look if I can find it very quickly.
So I didn't mean to spring this on you, Jed, but perhaps we can do it afterwards if you like. I don't need to.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly on the radar, and you know, if it's in need of being looked at, then it will be. I can assure you that because it's
no, sure. But who looks at it? How is it? What form does the review process take for looking at it?
Stephen, does the whistleblowing policy sit in your area? Can't remember now. So it'll be similar to if you remember when we did the RIPA policy. It'll be looked at whichever sort of head of service, whosever's area it's in will be looked at, and then it'll be brought to the proper committee to be sort of scrutinised at that stage.
So would it be this committee, do you think?
I would have thought so.
Okay, fine. Okay, that's absolutely fine. I don't want to make a huge. And a little bit further down, it talks about the contractors and third parties sign up to the whistleblowing policy, and there is evidence of this. So is that back to you, Nick? So what do they do? Just sign a sort of undertaking or something?
Well, what we'd be looking at, you've got to remember, Chairman, these are all recommendations which are coming out of the national strategy. So what we would need to do is work with council officers to identify whether there is a need to implement these things, whether the authority should have them. If the authority doesn't have them, why not? Is a good reason not to have them. If the authority does have them, how do we evidence that? So what we'll be looking for around procurement and contractors is that the council has some standard clauses within its contracts when it works with third parties. And that would include the things you'd expect to see around data protection, around corruption, those sort of standard terminology that we expect to see in the contracts for a local authority. And it would just be making sure that those organisations that we work with have similar policies in place to ensure that fraud and corruption doesn't happen within those organisations.
Fine. And kind of at what point would that be checked? Would that be done by the council officers who are responsible for the contracts that are issued to contractors?
Yes. So whoever's responsible for contract management, that will be your local contract managers, but they'll also be within the procurement team or a procurement officer with the authority who would be providing guidance and standard terms for inclusion in contracts. It might fall under James. It might fall somewhere else. So this is part of the research that we need to do to sort of flesh that out. Sure,
thank you. That's really interesting. And just the last point is just on the, again, apologies, no page number, but it's this Appendix B, which is the SAF's KPIs.
Yes.
And it's just the very last one, and it just talks about the hub, which I think we've kind of mentioned before. And I just wondered how things were going with developing that.
I'm very pleased to say that we've got membership of the hub signed off for East Herts Council. I think Stephen signed that in the last couple of weeks. That's gone off to the Cabinet Office. The intention is that once we finish with the NFI exercise, which is a massive data matching, data analytics exercise, we'll then start pushing East Herts data into the fraud hub so that we can do more frequent and responsive data matching in those services where it's going to be relevant. NFI takes very much it's all the data every second year. What we want to do is to take the data where the biggest risk is and actually refresh that data, check that data more frequently. So yeah, we've got plans in place to deliver that from April onwards.
That's good, isn't it? Because this has kind of been in development for a little while, hasn't it? But it should be a really good sort of
It
tool?
has, yes, it has. I'm really pleased that we've got East Hart signed up to this, because the other authorities where we have been using it, it's been really effective at identifying changes, not just fraud. It's identifying those changes before they become fraud.
Sure. I think as far as the cost of the hub, I think that would represent probably a smallish cost to the council, wouldn't it? I think we would pay for the running of it. I think.
Yeah, the hub itself, the cost is minimal.
Yeah, smashing. Okay, thank you. That was very interesting. Thanks very much. I don't know if there are any other questions or points. I can't see that there are any. In which case, we go back to the recommendation. Will, do we need to vote on this?
Yeah, you'll need a proposer in a second as well.
Okay, so that we can do. I wonder if we can do the two recommendations, which are to approve the anti-fraud plan for 21-22, and to note the activity to protect the council against fraud and corruption in 2021. I wonder, could I have a proposer to?
Happy to propose, Chairman.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Councillor Boo, and the second, Councillor Alder. Thank you. So we've got a proposer and a second. All those in favour of those two recommendations?
In favour. My camera is malfunctioning, but in favour, Chairman.
Thank you.
Chairman.
Yes, Councillor.
Chair, which method are we using? Are we using hands for agreeing it, or are we
sorry, forgive me. I should have made that clear. I think I was thinking we would use sort of hands on a screen, but on the basis that people's cameras aren't working, should we go for? Should we go for a blue hand? Do you think?
We can use hands to the screen and then just get a verbal indication from the two members you can't see.
Okay, fine. That sounds like a plan. Okay, is that okay with everybody? So we'll give the hand on the screen and then we'll get a verbal confirmation for those people who can't see. So just going back then, so I think those in favour of those two recommendations, I think we're all in favour. Councillor Wall Booth.
And I can see yeses on my screen from Councillor Fernando and Alistair Wall Booth.
Brilliant, perfect. Thank you. Okay, I think they're passed then. Thank you. Sorry about that. Brilliant, thank you. So Nick, thanks very much indeed for your presentation. You're very welcome to stay.
Thank you, Chair. I'll crack on and get some tea if that's all right.
Okay, go and find some more fraud. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening, everybody.
You too. Thank you. Bye now. Okay, so then that brings us on to the next item, which is the shared internal audit service, which is item 6, beginning on page 33. I think it's Simon. I think you're on for this.
Yes, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
The report provides members with an update on progress with delivering the Council's internal audit work programme at the end of February and the outcome of internal audits completed since the last committee meeting. It also contains details of change that's been made to the work programme, provides an update on the 2 high priority audit recommendations. In terms of work programme delivery, the table at the bottom of page 35 of your pack shows the audits that have been finished in recent weeks. In addition, a further 3 audits have now been finalised since my committee report was written. These audits are Treasury Management, Council Tax and Creditor Payments, all of which you'll be pleased to know received our Good Assurance rating. You'll see a further table over the page showing all 2020-21 audits are being worked on or have now been finished. Paragraph 2.4 of the report goes on to explain that we've been unable to progress one review because it's not quite ready to be audited. And this has been replaced with a new audit following a request from Stephen. Members may also recall me previously mentioning that such changes are fairly typical across most size partners in recent months. Unfortunately, we have had to cancel or reschedule a number of planned audits and adjust the programmes of work simply because of the pandemic, I'm afraid. Moving on to page 41, which provides details of the high priority recommendations. You can see there are 2 relating to historic IT audits, the first of which is known to have infrastructure dependencies. Members may even recall relevant managers discussing this with them at a meeting last year. The latest management comments do show work is in progress, and I hope members will be reassured that the recommendations will continue to be monitored until fully implemented over the coming months. Lastly, Appendix D on page 47 shows the audit report assurance levels. I just wanted to quickly let members know that the levels applied to this year's or to next year's audits will be slightly different. The Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy has recommended that standard assurance levels be adopted by all councils. For SIAS partners, this will mean what is currently shown as good assurance will be replaced with substantial assurance, and satisfactory assurance will be replaced with reasonable assurance. More importantly, the associated definitions are essentially unchanged in their meaning, and I feel this is only a minor adjustment, as we already have a 4-tier approach, as you can see, and two of the levels do of course remain unchanged. It's something I was asked to bring your attention, so I felt obliged to do that, and that concludes my report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Thank you. Any points or questions to ask at this stage? Can't see that there are. Somebody mentioned that the Millstream audit was essentially going to be postponed, and that that was going to be replaced by one on commercial rents.
Yes.
Forgive me if I didn't spot. When do we think the Millstream audit will happen? When would you think we will be in a position, or there will be a position when it can be audited? Do you have any idea?
Yes, I think it's down for Q2 in next year.
Yeah, it's probably the report's on. I didn't see it. Or didn't notice it, I should say. Okay. And commercial rents, is that something you've audited before, or is that a new area for your activities?
It's not been reviewed on my watch, as it were. I'm not sure whether it has been reviewed before, but it would seem a timely review. We're happy to accommodate Stephen's wishes.
Sure, thank you. And in terms, and you obviously then you went on to talk about in Appendix B the high priority, and you quite rightly said I think we're down to 2, which is probably the lowest number they've been for some while, I think.
Yes, yes, it is.
And I think we stand a decent chance. I mean, the cybersecurity one in particular. You know, maybe we stand a fighting chance of maybe having this one going for the next meeting of this committee, perhaps. Anyway, I'm not. Yeah, perhaps you don't have to comment on that, but I wonder whether that might be a possibility, perhaps. You're not going to comment.
No, I can do, Chairman. I think the suggestion was that the outstanding part of the recommendation, which related to a network tool, that would take place in Q3.
Q3, that's right.
So we've got a little way to go, I'm afraid.
Yes, that's fair enough, I suppose. Okay, thank you. And then onto the audit plan, which I think was a very good report. I must have said, very, very, very thorough. I'm just wondering if I wrote anything down on this. I think I did. Oh yes, again, I haven't got. It's just the use task, the internal audit plan, that one. And para 2.7, when it talks about the internal audit plan, and I think it sort of sets out sort of the number of internal audit days that we've got in the year, you know, because I think we've got a slight, obviously it's gone down, hasn't it, from 320 to 300. And
yes.
In a little table on that page, to the right-hand side of the page, it sets out sort of the various areas where you'll be spending your time. And sort of towards the bottom, there's a line, strategic support. And I just wondered, I mean, obviously it mentions that includes supporting this committee as part of that. I just wonder what else would be within that area of strategic support in terms of where you'd spend your time.
Yeah, I'll just look it up and I can. You're quite right. It's supporting this committee, but
I mean, that's included. Yeah, as part of
it also includes it's on page 63 of your report pack. It's providing an internal audit opinion.
Is this Appendix A? Oh, right, sorry.
Yeah, so you've got providing a head of internal audit opinion for the current year, the audit committee, as you say, periodic client meetings with Stephen and some of his colleagues. We monitor our monitor the audit plan throughout the year, provide progress reports. The council, as do all SIAS partners, makes provision for actually developing the shared internal audit service. We have a service plan we produce each year. And in 21-22, there is also an external quality assessment, which the council is contributing a number of working days to. And producing the 2022-23 internal audit plan, would you believe?
So in terms of the board, is there a board that oversees this?
Yes, that's right. There's a shared internal audit service board made up of largely of the chief financial officers from each of the partner authorities.
So I don't know, I'm not sure if this is, it's almost worth not asking, but in terms of, how often, the membership of the board, how often does it change? Is it fairly sort of constant almost, or does it change when the post holder changes?
It changes when the post holder changes, or they choose to send a deputy to the meeting. Essentially, it's the chief financial officer of each of the partner authorities, so it only changes as staff turnover occurs. Sure.
Okay. I just wondered, if you get the same people meeting every time, sometimes these things get a bit stale. Not suggesting from a moment these things would be stale, but I mean, you know what I mean. Sometimes it's good to have a bit of new. You don't need to comment on this one either. Again, on Appendix A, there's another little section about joint reviews.
Yes.
And what sort of examples? Could you give us an example of what a joint review might be and how it might work?
Yeah, we did a piece of work last year covering a joint review of the waste collection contract with North Herts.
Oh, sure. So it would be joint with another authority, perhaps.
Yes, one or more. We also did some work around the CCTV contract the year before last, which included quite a few of the SIAS partners.
Are these very common? Are they all, I guess they're quite big pieces of work, I suppose.
Are they what? Sorry.
So I just wonder if these sorts of reviews are very common. Do they happen very often? Because I guess they're quite large pieces of work, I suppose.
Yes, they are. The SIAS board gets to choose what the subject matter is. They would receive a report in the early part of each financial year. So it's really down to their appetite. We will always make a provision.
Sure. And would the various sort of audit and governance committees of the authorities get to see that report too?
Yes, they would. The final reports will be circulated in the usual way.
Smashing. And just one last thing before I think Councillor Stowe's got a question, but in terms of, and just below they've got shared learning. And would that be shared learning amongst the members of the shared audit service?
No, we typically issue a 6-monthly newsletter to the senior managers of the SIAS partners. That would contain details of any internal audit work that may be of common interest, for example, changes that are taking place within the profession, kind of a 6-monthly newsletter, for want of a better way of describing it.
Sure.
Historically, SIAS members have found that sharing the information quite useful.
Sure. Do you think that might be something that we might be interested in as a committee, or not really? To see that, maybe not all the time, but every now and again, Vivian again, maybe.
Yeah, there's no reason that the newsletters couldn't be shared with members of the committee.
That might be quite useful, I think. I don't know what members think, but I think it would, if it wasn't too much trouble, I think it would be quite nice.
No, not at all.
Okay, thank you. Okay, sorry, forgive me now. Councillor Stowe, I think you were first, if you've got a question.
Yes, I wanted to refer to page 64, Appendix B. And I was just I know these are reserved items, but I was interested to see health and safety, and you've got the A to F of those different options. And I think, when we've had members and officers working remotely for so long now, and this could continue for a long while still to come, that is we need to enlarge on that a bit with the working practice in different optional settings. And I think that could be homes and mental health issue, isolation of members and officers as well, working from home. I think that's a big area, and that needs, perhaps, in my opinion, it needs expanding a bit more before it comes into the proper audit system. I have your thoughts, and that'd be great. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that's a valid comment. I'm quite happy to take that comment on board. If the audit comes forward, we can work the scope up in more detail.
Thank you. Councillor Alder, I think you had a question?
Yes, Chair. It's going back a bit. It's to Appendix D, and the first table on Appendix D. The bottom comment about the internal control has serious gaps and controls are not effective without urgent management intervention. What interventions are being planned?
Oh, the assurance ratings,
yes.
Page 47.
Yes.
They are indicative assurance levels and priority levels that we apply to all our work. It's not giving assurance rating on a particular piece of work, telling you what the outcome is. It's just showing the levels that we would apply to our work.
So why is it in there then?
Just so members can, it's a key in effect. It's for members to see the levels that we typically apply to our work.
It seems to me a bit sort of pointless, but still, if you're satisfied that no action seems to be needed, so why is it there at all? Anyway, that's the point.
Okay, is that fine? Okay, Councillor, are you happy with that? I mean, wasn't it just to sort of show? Wasn't it just indicative of what the reasons would be?
Yes.
It's just to show the new SITFA classifications of assurance which will be operational from next year. So it's just to give members a feeling for what they will mean when they start to report using them next year. So it's not referring to a system. It's just what you'll be seeing next year, system by system. That'll be the level of assurance that you see, which is subtly different from the levels of assurance and the descriptions you've got on them this year.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think there are no other questions, in which case we need to go back to the recommendations. There are 3 recommendations for this. We're noting the internal audit progress report. We're approving the changes to the internal audit plan as of the 20th of Feb, and noting the status of the critical and high priority recommendations. I think, like before, we need to vote again. So we have a proposer for well, provided we're happy for those to be accepted. We've got a proposer from Lieutenant Councillor Stowe.
Happy to second, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ward-Booth. We've got a proposer and a seconder. So can we have a vote, please? Councillor Fernando, yeah, I think that's it. I think we're done. I think we're all in favour. Thank you. Smashing. Okay, that's that done. So Simon, thank you very much indeed for both for your verbal and your written reports. They've been very, really, really good. You're very welcome. Are you going to stay for a bit longer?
Yes, I will.
Smashing. Okay, lovely. Thank you very much indeed. So then that takes us on to the quarterly corporate budget monitor, which begins on page 67.
Sorry, Chair, can I just clarify? So we've dealt with both item 6 and item 7 there. Is that
yes
what you're suggesting? Okay. So all of the recommendations for both.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. That's okay, William. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Just
Smashing. Thank you. So, okay, we can progress on to item 8, which is the quarterly corporate budget monitor, beginning on page 67. Stephen, I think this is your report.
Yes, Chairman. I think, relatively speaking, our Q3 forecast shows an overall overspend on the revenue budget of 158,000, which, considering the loss of income as a result of the national lockdowns and the fact the government compensation is only 70 pence in the pound, I think it's pretty good news. That's a pretty good news story that we've managed to contain the overspend to 158,000. I know there are some councils elsewhere who overspend that in an afternoon. So I think it's a pretty good news story that we're only overspent by 158,000 going forward. Members will also note in the report that as part of year end, we will be doing a review of all the debtors. We think it's been about 2 years since there has been a fundamental look at collectability of debtors. Members can see the classifications in the report, which the write-offs will be presented against. And because this is a year-end exercise and there'll be a lump of it, officers are going to forego delegation and all write-offs will go to the executive to approve the actual write-off figure. So that, and as I said, it will be against all of those classifications, which are, for example, bankruptcy, IVA, the debtor has died and there's no money in the estate, they've absconded and we cannot trace them through other local authorities and tracing agencies, etc., etc. So you can see that all of those reasons are really uncollectible debt reasons. So that's the only other point in the report to note, Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, are there any questions? I think you're absolutely right. I think that this council continues to do a very good job in extremely challenging conditions. I think, as you rightly said, to limit the overspend to the figure that we have, I think is a very good outcome. I think. What I would like now, actually, Councillor Moore Booth, you've got a question. Please ask away.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a very quick question. I note that a lot of so there has been an underspend in certain departments, mainly related to vacant positions and underspend on salary costs. Are those positions being filled and recruited into? I know, is that going to have an adverse impact on the revenue budget going forward, or is recruitment for those vacant posts on hold? Thank you.
Any proposal for recruitment has to come to leadership team, and it has to be justified, and it's a pretty rigorous process. I think James can confirm that. Every single vacancy has gone through and looked at very carefully about whether it needs to be recruited, whether agency staff can be used instead, or whether a temporary arrangement can be used. And we're always looking for restructuring options and further savings. So we haven't put a dead stop to recruitment, but there is a process where any recruitment has to go to leadership team to be confirmed by, and every single member of the leadership team needs to sign it off. So, and it is a pretty rigorous process. So it's subtly better than just a blanket, you can't recruit, but it is a rigorous process to make sure that the recruitment's necessary.
Super, thank you.
In paragraph 2.11, strategic finance and property, the last bullet on that page talks about a £54,000 reduction in income from Millstream related to loan interest due to the timing of property purchases. And I'm guessing that this was foreseen. I mean, it seems quite a large amount of sort of reduction in income because of the timing of a property purchase. I guess that was factored into the decision. You may not know the answer to that, but I hope it was.
I'm sorry, Sharon, where did you say you were? Which paragraph number?
2.11.
2.11.
2.11, and it's strategic finance and property. So I've got a page number.
Right, page 71, yes. So
it's the very last bullet. It's the 54k reduction in income because due to the timing of our property purchase.
Yeah, yes, Chairman. When the initial lockdown came on, if you remember, estate agents were closed, and so there was difficulty in actually going out and viewing properties and purchasing properties. So what we found is that the purchasing has been bunched into January, February, and March. So obviously the original estimate when the estimate was done prior to council in January 2020, there was an assumption that these properties would come on evenly during the course of the year. Because of the pandemic and the lockdown, they've tended to bunch into January, into around December, January time. And also, of course, there's less properties than the original business plan foresaw. And of course, as you know now, because of the changes to the Public Works Loans Board lending rules, we've paused any further acquisitions until such time as we had clarification from Council on what is meant by primarily for yield.
It's just, I think you've explained it, yeah, but it's just, it kind of slaps you in the face a bit, saying, well, hold on a minute, because of the timing of the purchase, it's cost us 54 grand. But clearly, it's mostly due, I guess, to circumstances related to COVID. I suppose.
Yeah, nobody could have foresaw when they set the budget in January 2020 that we would have national lockdowns going on as long as we've had, and their effects on being able to carry out normal business as normal and normal activities. So it's just a feature of the pandemic that Millstream have borrowed later on in the year in a bunched way rather than evenly throughout the year, and that's just a net result of the pandemic. And of course, it's not an income stream that you can claim government funding for.
Over the page, I mean, we've got a decent sized paragraph on planning and building control, paragraph 2.14. I mean, this area seems to have been almost one of the biggest sort of problem areas, I guess, for the council in terms of income. Do you know, I mean, clearly some of it's COVID related, obviously, you know, clearly, but I mean, is it fair to say that this area has been suffering for a while? And, you know, is it an area that the council have a concern about?
Well, I've only been here 6 months, Chairman, so I can't comment more than 6 months worth. I know there's a restructure in progress in planning. 110,000 of the overspend relates to appeals costs at Little Haddon,
yes, indeed.
About which I know very little. So, but you clearly all members do know. And obviously, COVID-19 has we've had the sort of effect of stopping people applying for planning permission, but work still goes on sites where permission's been granted on work, etc. And then suddenly there's another burst of it again as lockdown comes off, and then it stops again as lockdown goes back on again. So I can't really say if there's an issue in the planning service. I don't think there is. I think this is just an effect of COVID. And I think what you will find as well, Chairman, is when you have a district plan approved, the developers go in very hard and very early on their major sites, and they'll get their planning permissions for it, and they will bank them and they will sit on them.
Yeah.
And they will land bank it because the land, of course, has increased from an agricultural field to a housing estate, residential land. So it's what they do. They blame us for the housing supply issues when actually it's them land banking, not us. So you'll find this is a feature of the planning system is as soon as you have an approved plan, they will go and get those major sites and they will get them in the bank, and effectively they know when the planning application will run out. So they go through the reserved matters bits at a leisurely pace, and then they'll put the spade in the ground and maybe build 5, and then they secure the planning permission, and then they can mothball a site if they like, and there's very little else we can do about it. But of course, the costs of that planning application, which they paid maybe 2-3 years before, we've still got the costs of carrying out the planning process throughout. So it's just a feature of the way the planning system is, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's fair enough. Thank you. No, you've got a question? Yes, Fernando?
Yes, sorry.
worries.
Very clearly, Chair. Just with regard to page 85, the graph showing the debt outstanding. So I understand that anything older than 90 days will go to executive. Is there any update on the figures? Because even less than 30 days, there's quite a significant debt amount there. Is there any update on those debt figures?
I haven't got any update on that. They produced the quarterly report. I haven't seen it. I came back from leave on Monday. I haven't seen any debtors figures. So as far as I.
Sorry, Stephen, you've gone on to mute. We lost you there.
I haven't got an update on those figures. No, those figures were. I don't have a real time. I don't have yet a real time. Debtors is one of the first areas of finance where I'm making system changes. and process changes to make it more efficient and more effective. And write-off is part of that process as well, of clearing the decks for the credit controllers to be able to see what they're doing. But I am aware that there are several ways the system's being used that I don't think people in finance were told how the system worked properly. So they're doing certain things that they shouldn't do, and there's different processes. So it's something that will be sorted, and I'm fairly confident within a couple of years you will see a dramatic increase in performance from sundry debts compared to now.
Thank you.
Fernando? Do you have anything else to ask, Councillor Fernando? Okay.
No, just thank you, and it's good to note that changes are planned, because it is obviously one of those that debt needs to be picked up quickly, and I'm glad that Stephen seems to be on top of process changes to implement that.
As part of the writing off the bad debt, do you need to involve the external auditor in this at an early stage, or do you just need to tell them what you've done?
Well, in terms of writing off debt?
Yeah.
I don't need to tell them anything. They audit the figures as at the 31st of March.
So they'll just come across it as part of the audit. Fair enough.
They read the papers. They know what's going on. They would probably expect the debts to have gone down, and they'll see a write off against the provision. So,
fine. Okay. Thank you. Under operations, which is paragraph 2.15, again, there's a decent size overspend there for obvious reasons. One of the reasons for the overspend is something called contract expenditure. What does that relate to, please? That's paragraph 2.15.
Page 72.
Well, Chairman, for example, we have been paying the management fee over to SLM, even though the leisure centres are closed. So. And we have agreed to meet some of the additional COVID-related costs for Urbasa on the refuse and recycling contract. I think it's just that some contractual payments we are contractually required to make, COVID or no COVID. So we are contractually required to pay, for example, APCOA to provide the civil parking enforcement wardens, despite the fact there's nobody out on the streets, and despite the fact that there's no cars in the car parks, we still have to pay APCOA for the cost of the guys who would be patrolling. And probably are still patrolling, actually. So there are some things where you think, oh well, the car parks are empty. Obviously, there's no costs. Well, there are costs and contractual costs that go on. So I think that's what that means.
Thank you. And obviously, further on in this paragraph, at the bottom of the following page, it deals with recycling, and I guess the drop in the serious drop of income that we were seeing in sort of getting for our recycled items.
That's mainly the loss of the recycling credits with the alternative financing model from the county. So we've
stopping that now.
Pardon?
They're stopping that now.
This year there will be no money at all, because the first lockdown there was a 12% increase in residual waste, and that 12% increase in residual waste has not gone away. It's stayed fairly constant at 12% more. So there is no recycling. Next year they think it will be zero, because they can't see the residual waste going down sufficiently. And obviously the county council is one of the very few remaining county councils still paying out recycling credits to waste collection authorities. In most of the rest of the country, they stopped paying them out to waste collection authorities a decade ago. So it is up for renewal. It is up for review at HCC, and I suspect that the county council will say, sorry, but can't afford it.
I mean, again, recycling is proving to be a real sort of hole under the waterline for us, isn't it? In terms of where we were a while ago to where we are now. Is the council looking at this? I mean, I'm sure it is. Trying to be innovative or inventive in trying to find ways of improving the situation.
I can certainly say innovative and inventive. Yes, we are looking at a potential circular economy measures, in particular around plastics. So I don't want to say any more because it's confidential. So, but yes, we are fundamentally aware that in the past we've just recycled our recycling we have collected and then we've just exported it. And I think with the closure of China and the closure of the Asian markets to recycle it, we have to find a way of dealing with it in this country. So the days of us just exporting it, I think, are over. But there's just not enough capacity in the country at the moment to actually process stuff. So it's finding innovative ways of dealing with the problem that will also, just by accident, happen to turn income as well.
And the last part of this section talks about an increase in materials handling costs. Is also forecast due to increased contract charges as a result of COVID.
Yeah, the increased contract charges are what I said to you, Chairman. We've agreed with basically we'll meet some of their costs when they've had staff who've had to self-isolate from the refuse crews. But obviously the refuse still needs to be collected, so they've had to go and get agency staff. They've had some people who were shielding and they therefore furloughed, but they chose to pay them the 20% extra on top of the government 80%. So we've agreed to meet some of those costs with our BASA. And also, material handling fees is basically stuff that yesterday they take off us and pay us £5 for a ton. They now take off us and give us a bill for £5 a ton because the market is that fluid on a weekly basis. The value of materials goes up and down. So you're going to get different material costs and income as the year goes on. It depends on the day and it depends on the market, it depends on the material. The lower value stuff like Tetra Packs, yogurt pots, etc., a whole raft of councils have stopped collecting them now because there's just no value in them. And obviously now we're waiting on the national strategy, which will tell us what materials we are collecting. Well, I'm not entirely sure the national strategy will tell us what to do with them when we've collected them.
Sure, because it's not that long ago that we started collecting things like Tetra Packs, is it? Because before that we weren't collecting them, and then anyway, that is what it is. That's not an easy one to call, is it? I must say.
I'm not an expert on waste management, Chairman, so.
No, well, I'm sure you've done more about it than I did. Paragraph 2.17, shared business and technology, talks about the IT cloud investigation project that's been bumped into next year. Do you know why that was postponed?
I have absolutely no idea what it is, Chairman. I'm sorry. I don't have that level of detail in my head on that.
Well, I mean,
I think it may be something to do with excuse me, of hosting applications in the cloud rather than in the
like a physical server, you mean?
Rather than in the data center in Stevenage. I think it's hosting them in the cloud.
Yeah.
So I mean, for example, Microsoft 365, when we change over later this year, a lot of that is actually cloud hosted anyway. So I think it's potentially about changing all of our systems over to cloud-based, which is pretty difficult for revenues and benefits, for example, because I don't know of a cloud-based council tax, business rates and housing benefits system at all. So
I guess this is why this is an investigation project, I suppose.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, well, hopefully that will come in. I think certainly a lot of businesses, I mean, the business I work for, we've switched all our sort of server, if you like, to the cloud-based. But it seems to me the way forward. And I guess it's probably more secure as well, I guess. Moving through the report, and I guess this is one thing you've alluded to before, when we're talking about use of reserves. And paragraph 3.1.3 talks about the smoothing of the leisure contract costs. Is that the thing you alluded to before, maybe about having to pay the leisure the contractors, even though maybe the leisure centres themselves aren't necessarily open?
3.1.4, you said.
3.1.3, which is just below the table 4, and it talks about it talks about the contribution from reserves and the Harlow Gilston Town, and also the smoothing of the leisure contract.
Yeah, that refers to, Chairman, the fact that we're a little behind schedule on the 2 leisure centres, and SLM bid on the contract, which assumed those leisure centres would be open by now. So it's mainly to do with smoothing out some of that by reserve. So we have additional costs that we need to meet because they're running the leisure centres as are. But once the 2 new ones come online, then they'll move into the position of them paying us rather than us paying them to provide leisure.
Okay, and in terms of the use of reserves, I mean, obviously, I mean, the reserves are playing a more and more important role in the council's finances, I guess, in the current climate. Are you can give us comfort that the level of council's reserves overall is still at a sufficiently high level?
Chairman, as I put in my report to council when they sent the budget last month, yes, there's sufficient. It's actually this month. I apologise. This month, and yes, the resources are sufficient. The reserves are sufficient.
Well, thank you.
You would certainly know about it, Chairman, if I had concerns.
Good. Good. Smashing. Okie dokie. I don't think I had anything else. I don't know if there are any other. I don't know if there are any other comments on this report. I'm just trying to find the page. I've lost it. So in which case, we need to go back to the recommendations, if that's okay. No more questions. And there are 2 recommendations. Will, sorry, did you want to say something, Will?
I was just going to say this is just for noting, really, mainly, Chair, for information. So.
Oh, fine. So the 2 recommendations, which are the net revenue budget forecast of overspend and the revised capital budget for 2021, just for noting them. Fine. Okay. Thank you. Okay, members. Stephen, thank you very much indeed for your attendance and your report. Thank you very much indeed. So that brings us on to the annual review of risk management strategy, beginning on page 87.
That's me, Chair.
Hello. Hi.
Hello.
Smashing.
Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed.
The risk management strategy, it remains fit for purpose, and we made some changes drawing on Stephen's past experiences in other authorities. I have provided 2 appendices. On page 93 is a clean version of the new document. On page 109, Appendix 2 tracks changes from last year's document. To summarise the changes, we have increased the scoring matrix from a 3x3 matrix to a 4x4, revising some of the thresholds. It provides a clearer, more accurate description of the illustration, of the risks facing the council. We have reintroduced service risk monitoring. One leadership team will monitor those service risks. That was something we intended reintroducing last year, but was pulled in Q1. Stephen is determined to implement that this year. The target scores will no longer be set. They didn't seem to work as we had hoped. They didn't provide the focus that we were looking to. So we've removed those. Perhaps the biggest change is the reformatting of the monitoring template. That will be apparent in the next item on the agenda. But just to give you some information, we have renamed the title as a vulnerability. We split trigger and consequence from the previous consequence column. Hopefully that will make the report easier to understand, clearer for members, and provide more detail. The controls planned and the controls that have been implemented will still be recorded, but an update on current position box has been added. To give you some examples of what you'll see in the report from the next agenda item, you might see financial variances, staffing data, changes in legislation, even a number of rogue emails intercepted have been recorded. So that's the sort of information you can expect to see there. So I'd appreciate any comments from members or any recommendations that you think would enhance the policy.
Okay, so this is item 9.
Yes.
And then we're going to do item 10 separately.
Imminently, yes, yes.
Rather than, okay, fine. So this must have been quite a large piece of work, I would think.
No, not a huge amount.
Really?
Stephen has undertaken a fair bit. It's the strategy, sorry, remains, it pretty much remains fit for purpose. It's had a good audit rating, although Simon was talking about the changing classification, so I'm not quite sure where that falls in the current scale. It follows the trade body guidance. It seems to be working fairly well. There's just a few areas that I've highlighted that really we have changed. So no, this hasn't been a particularly significant piece of work. The next agenda item has been, it always involves more work each quarter, but yeah, Stephen's made some great progress preparing, updating the report in the new format. But as for capturing risk in the new format, once the register is fully populated, we don't envisage a great deal of extra work, really, no.
Well, I think the key, I always think, for these sorts of documents is that they're not too big, too long, because if they're too big a document, you tend to sort of lose focus on what you should be looking at, shouldn't you? So the key is to sort of make it cover everything, but not be too large, and that's the key to it. I think
we've always thought the strategy is proportionate to the risk that the council faces. Obviously, the county council and other organisations will have far more complex processes, but at these starts, we consider that the strategy is fit for purpose, is proportionate.
Yeah, but I think it also it sets out all the. I think it's much clearer than it was before. Yeah, it's much more so a coherent document. I think it's much easier for people like us to read. You know, maybe you aren't, lay people, if you like, or people who aren't intimately involved in the council's business. I suppose it makes sense, or makes more sense.
Okay, great, thank you.
I don't know if anyone's got any questions. No, nothing coming up. I mean, obviously, clearly you've had to, in terms of the Appendix 1, the examples of key risks, you've got to obviously include COVID-related risks in there, and sort of responses to the pandemic.
Yeah, business continuity and emergency planning have always featured, but obviously the current situation has really focused minds. It has introduced a new risk for the council as well.
Sure. Did you? Well, I don't know if this is now or later, but things like environmental, you've got sort of climate change related events there. Do you think the council might be affected by sort of in the way it does things as a result of climate? For instance, in my business, we produce accounts for people from time to time, and climate change is becoming more of an issue in terms of how you do what you do in light of climate change. Like, how does it affect your business? How does it affect the way you do things? Is what you do, or you're doing what you do with half an eye on climate change? And I wondered, is that a risk to the council? Do you think the government might come along and say, look, you've got to cut emissions, or you've got to do something differently, which might cost us more money? Or is that a risk that we might have to think about? Do you think, rather than things like extreme weather or things like that, which is the kind of the front end of climate change? I just wondered, is that a risk, or maybe it's covered somewhere else? Do you think?
You'll find it's covered when we get on to the next item, Chairman. You'll find that is actually covered in one of the risks. I think it's in the political environmental risk.
Oh, really? I'm sorry. I did
captured rather than under environment itself, because because the trigger will be a political change, if you see what I mean. So you will find the climate change style, the climate change agenda, and the potential of being fined about emissions and making local authorities responsible for hitting emissions targets. That sort of thing is covered in that risk number 2, which is the political environmental risk. You'll find it there. And in terms of is climate change affecting us already? Well, if you remember, last summer was extremely hot for days on end, and it meant that refuse crews couldn't actually work in the hottest part of the day, so we were sending them out early, which obviously has an effect. I think we're going to see more of that. It absolutely bucketed down in January, and the waters rose in Bishop Stortford almost to the leisure centre itself. I think we're going to see, we're seeing more and more of those extreme weather events. It's actually the disruption of the extreme weather events that are going to catch us out, I think, far more than and government moving and saying local authorities will be responsible for maintaining the emissions in their area. I don't think that's on the government agenda. The governments of all parties are too centralising and controlling to allow local authorities to do stuff like that, I think. So it's more the extreme weather events and the constant heat and the very sudden downpours that are going to affect us.
I think we've gone straight onto the next item, actually, a little bit.
Yeah, so I was going to add on that point as well, that staff briefings took place today. Climate change is always on the agenda of the staff briefings. Today, that it was explained that all staff will be having related training and to look at how their services respond and actions that they can take. So, yes, firmly on the agenda.
Okay, well,
do you want me to go on to item 10?
Well, hold on a second. Why don't we finish item 9? I don't know if there are any questions, but I think the report that you're set out in this part of the agenda it makes things much easier to read. It's a big improvement it was before. I couldn't think of any sort of comments to alter it. I just thought it made things much easier, and I think it was a much more readable document. So I think I
Great, thank you.
Recommend it to this committee. And so the recommendation for this item is that the risk management structure be reviewed, and officers advise of recommendations that could enhance the management of risk and associated monitoring processes. Well, unfortunately, we haven't come up with any, everybody, because it's that good. So that's good. So, well, we need to vote on this, do we?
No, Chair, I think you've covered it off there with your comments. Thank you.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, well, with that, we're noting that. And then thank you very much, and congratulations to you and to Stephen and to all the other colleagues for the work you've done on that.
Thank you.
So now we can go on to item 10.
Okay.
Thank you.
Item 10. Essentially, there are 2 items within the report. At the March meeting, you'd usually receive the standard quarterly monitoring report and a list of risks that leadership team have proposed and monitored in the coming financial year. However, given the changes sought, the new template that we're introducing, we thought we'd try and roll the 2 items into one report, mainly so that you can have an example of the report that we hope to submit in future meetings. So you'll see Appendix 1 on page 141 is a new format risk register, also proposing the content for 21-22. On page 167, you'll see the Q3 risk register in the existing format. So we've transposed a lot of that content into Appendix 1, the new register, but we included the existing format just so that members can track the progress in the traditional form. So you've already mentioned that you think the report is clearer and hope it's preferential. So just please bear in mind the time constraints pulling that together. We haven't been able to obtain full buy-in yet from leadership team to complete the report, but you should see a comprehensive document in Q4 if it sounds like members are happy for this format to continue. Within the reports, you've seen that we've plotted the risk scores on a matrix, which gives hopefully members a clearer illustration of the key risks that the council's facing. We've summarised those, which you'll see a resource is primarily the reduction in the government grant combined with the pandemic, the business economy and the response to the pandemic. You can see the difference in the scoring on page 135 and 136 in the report, where they're plotted on the new and the old matrix. For the coming year's content, leadership team reviewed the risks that are increasing, escalating from either service level or they're just considered too significant and should be reported to this committee. New risks have been added, which are covered in 4.4, and in 4.5 we have separated 2 risks from their parent risks as they're considered too significant and should feature in their own right. So I hope you, as you say, do find the format easier to follow. And do you have any questions or do you have any recommendations on the content?
Oh, Councillor Stowe, you have a question?
Not particularly a question, but I wanted to sort of congratulate everybody involved with this new system, because there's so much more information on there, which is helpful, and we can get the background to it. And I think it's a great system, and if we can keep this going through, I think it's much easier than the previous one. I think it's a success, so well done.
Okay, thank you. I think in Q4 you will see more information when heads have had a chance to populate. Stephen has undertaken a lot of that work. Heads have contributed, but yeah, there will certainly be more content. So thanks for the feedback.
Would you think about maybe using things like a heat map, maybe, to show the risks? Is that, I mean, maybe I should have mentioned that earlier. Is that something that you consider?
Sorry, in what way? Could you explain that? Sorry.
Well, it kind of shows it shows the sort of the risks that exist a bit slightly more pictorially. That's all.
Okay. Yeah, we can.
I mean,
we have the grid. We have the grid, the 4x4 grid, and we have the red area and the numbers of the risk, and we just show where they are on the grid.
I mean that's just kind of similar. I guess. Yeah. Fine.
Would you prefer it if we named the risk instead of giving its number? Is that?
That might be. Could you do that?
We can have a look at that. Yes, we can have a look at it. Yeah.
Yep. Simple. Or we can just put the key below. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be. Yeah, that would be quite a good idea. Thank you. Thank you.
Right.
And I think we talked about the climate change item, which fitted into the political risk, which is fine. I just, in terms of the cyber related risks, are you happy that in terms of they're high enough up the scale? Just that in terms of, in my day job, whenever we look at a risk register, cyber just seems to be, if it's not climate change, it's cyber. Cyber just seems to be there, and it seems to be one of the big risks. I just wonder sometimes whether this council is it red enough, in other words.
I think we had this conversation either last week or the one before, and I did. I think we did put Helen standing on the spot, and she did give justification for her scoring. But we can certainly take that back to leadership team. And
also with regard on I think it's number 3, which is the performance and resilience and the security of IT systems. Forgive me, I haven't got a page for this.
Yeah, it's on page 150.
And the various triggers. We've got data and information lost, and we've got a cyber attack. It all talks about. Is there anywhere on this where maybe a cyber attack result in a loss of money? Is that covered anywhere? Did you hear about these spoof payment where someone sends an email, like Stephen sends an email to somebody, not Stephen obviously, but someone who pretends to be Stephen, says please pay 50 grand to Councillor Stowe, or something like that, and someone it purports, looks like for all the world it's come from Steve, that sort of stuff, or something like that. Is that perceived to be a risk, and if so, is it covered somewhere?
Okay, it is, yes. Of course, the other area is extortion, of course, where a hacker will take the system down,
like ransom
in exchange for a ransom. Yes. Yeah. So this is one of the risks that needs working up further. It is covered. We're looking. I mentioned last meeting as part of the insurance renewal. We're looking at the option of cyber risk cover as well, which does provide some assurance. The shared service does slightly complicate the procurement of cyber cover, unfortunately, but it's something that we're looking into with our broker at the moment. But yes, this risk
mitigation on the other side of the check balances, isn't it? But it's just the fact that I just wanted to make sure that the risk of losing money and indeed the reputational damage that something like that might cause the council is covered as a risk somewhere.
Yes, sorry, I'm looking at 2 screens. Bear with me a second.
So I'm looking
there are.
I know what you mean.
They are listing some of the consequences. This risk will certainly be worked up further for the next meeting.
I mean, this reputational damage I can see is covered in the consequence.
There was a cyber risk, a cyber attack, business continuity exercise in collaboration with Stevenage Council last week as well. And the lessons learned, some of them are being reviewed tomorrow at a business continuity meeting, and will feature in a report taken forward to leadership team imminently as well. So we'll feedback we can feedback the results from that exercise and leadership team review. Hopefully, I was just thinking Q4.
And can I just say as well, Councillor, that cyber attack covers all sorts of stuff from ransomware to dedicated denial of service to spear phishing, and every other type of name that they give these various things. And can I just assure you that we get regularly bombarded with emails which are using an email address mask on it, inviting us to click on bank accounts and to do payment, etc., etc. Can I just assure you there are non-electronic controls when it comes to faster payments out of the NatWest Bank, and I'm fairly confident that you're not going to result in somebody sending a very clever email to somebody, it going out to the bank There are processes that go on to make sure to say, why are you making this payment again? Why did the chief executive ask for the payment? And then when we get out of the email, we can spot. I mean, I'm an expert at spotting these. I used to get an email at my previous council, which was always signed off Charles, which the chief executive never called himself, and that's how I knew instantly anything signed Charles was a fraud. I can say that now because he's retired, so I'm not breaching any security protocols now. So
I hear what you're saying, but is that risk sort of noted down in this register somewhere? Because I think
that would be a failure of internal control, because the internal control should pick it up. So that's in the same way as me walking in and going, here, I want a payment. Not electronically, me just walking in and going, here, I want a payment, and somebody just glibly doing the payment. That would be a failure of internal control, in the same way that the spear phishing or the phishing would be a failure of internal control.
Right. Fine. Okay. And in this section as well, we talk about data protection. There's a reference to data protection. Could a mitigation or be that the council now has a dedicated data protection officer? Perhaps. I didn't say that was mentioned anywhere.
Well, Chairman, I was putting these together, and I think it was gone midnight when I was doing it, and it's not a complete version of it. So
no, I think it's very good. I'm very impressed with it. I thought.
I'll defer to the head of legal and democratic services, because data protection falls under his service. So.
Yeah, and you are quite right, Chair. And we do have a dedicated data protection manager and information governance manager in place now, who is currently reviewing all of the data protection information governance policies and that sort of thing. So yeah, that is all in hand.
On the subject of that, and I wonder whether, if I might mention, do you think that it might be appropriate at some point for us to meet the data protection officer?
Yeah, absolutely. I
don't know what members think, but I think that'd be quite a useful.
Yeah, I don't know if you'll recall back in November, Chairman, when I brought a report just outlining some of the breaches that we had and how they'd been dealt with and that kind of thing. And I believe it was Councillor Ward Booth asked if that could become a bit more of a regular thing. My intention was to get the data protection manager to front the next report of that. I can't remember when it's listed for, but he will be coming along to that.
Well, that'd be really good. I hope members think that's a good idea. Councillor Ward Booth, I see you've got your hand up.
Thank you, Chairman. Just leading on from what James said, I think it's a positive step that we've got someone sort of on board now to look at the data security and information storage and compliance with the various rules. I think it would be quite useful to have in the KPIs and things that come to this committee on a sort of regular basis. It'd be useful if we had one on sort of data protection compliance. So have there been any data breaches? And I can't think of anything else off the top of my head, but that might be a way of incorporating the work of the new data manager into the review and audit that this committee does.
Chairman, if I could just jump in the context of what you've just been saying about meeting the data protection officer, we do have a report on the May agenda, which is the GDPR and data retention. So that'd be an opportunity to meet him then.
Brilliant. I think that'd be a very good idea. Thank you. Great stuff. Okay. So I can't see any more hands. And I think that's been a really good discussion. Thank you again for all your hard work on this. I think it's a very, very good piece of work. And the recommendation, it's just a note again, Will.
Yeah, it just mirrors the last report, Chairman.
So again, yeah, we're just noting this. So I think we're happy to note that. Thank you, and thank you very much indeed, Graham, for your report.
Great, thank you.
Thank you so much for everything, and you're very welcome to stay.
I'll battle the kids at bedtime.
Yeah. Anyway, thanks so much for everything. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so that brings us on to item 11, which is the Local Government Association Model Code of Conduct, which was marked to follow. So that's a separate On the summary. So,
Yeah,
James, are you taking this one?
Yes, I am. You should have the supplementary
Yeah,
report.
yeah, certainly came. Yeah, we've got it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, again, just thinking back to that November committee, which I was mentioning a moment ago as well. You will recall, hopefully, that I brought a bit of an update as to what was happening with the Local Government Association Model Code of Conduct. You'll see in the summary section of the report, obviously, just to give you a bit of a recap, because November was quite a while ago, that the Committee on Standards in Public Life had obviously made some recommendations on ethical standards in local government, and the Model Code of Conduct was sort of something that was put together off the back of this by the LGA. Some comment was asked of local government. Back in November, the local government had not made any comments. That remains true as of today's date as well. However, we have been told that comment will be forthcoming at some stage. But you will recall at that meeting, it was said that if government had still not made any remarks within 6 months, that we would look to look at this issue again and make a decision as to whether or not the Model Code of Conduct should be implemented. It's not quite 6 months since November. However, the Local Government Association has finalised a copy of the code now. That came out in sort of late-ish January of this year. There have been some slight changes. I don't know if you recall from the last meeting, but there was a bit of debate around the fact that the term respect had been removed from the Constitution and replaced with the term of civility. That had caused a bit of confusion, as because the word respect was thought to be a lot more recognised than being civil. I think the Local Government Association has taken that on board, and they've now removed civility and reintroduced respect. So a little bit more background, which we did cover before, but I'll just go over again. The current code of conduct that we have has been in place since at least 2018, but probably before then. 2018 is before my time at the council. However, I have spoken to officers who were looking at the Constitution at that time, and they have no recollection of the code of conduct having been looked at that point. So it is probably getting on a bit now, and probably could do with sort of a bit of sprucing up. The code of conduct the Model Code of Conduct gives us an opportunity to adopt something that has quite clearly gone through a rigorous process of being put together by the Local Government Association. It is something that's going to hopefully be taken up across the country. Some indicative figures that I've had from the Lawyers in Local Government group is that roughly 20% of councils are adopting it in full. Roughly another 25% are adopting it in part, which is what I'm suggesting that the committee recommends to council tonight, which gives us, as a first uptake, close to 45 to 50% of councils taking it up straight away. One would hope that over time that will increase, and it will lead us to a position where most councils are singing from the same hymn sheet instead of having the patchwork that we've got currently. You will see number 4, I've tried to be objective and set out points that are in favour of adopting the code at 4.2, and also at 4.3 points that you might consider that will go against adoption of the code. I'm sure you've all read those. I won't go into any of them in detail now. Happy to obviously answer any questions that you might have on them. And yeah, I think it is an improvement on the code of conduct that we currently have within the Constitution. My intention, if it were this committee's recommendation that it be adopted and that full council eventually did adopt it, would be then to try and approach some of the local town and parish councils to see if they would likewise be interested in implementing it at their level as well. I think sometimes it can cause a bit of confusion when you have dual and triple hatted councillors all working from 2 or 3 different codes of conduct, and therefore having this one document across at least 2, if not 3 layers of local government would be very helpful to have a level of consistency. So yeah, happy to take any questions you might have on it. You'll see it is contained at Appendix A, and also a slightly, the only amendment to the model code is also in at Appendix 2 as well.
Right, indeed. James. Any questions or comments any of the members would like to make? I mean, certainly, I think your paper summarises the position very well. I mean, I think there is a compelling case for us to agree with your suggestion. I mean, I thought, as I think I mentioned to you the other day, that I think you do very well in presenting a balanced approach in your paper. But I think the points against adoption are not substantive in any way, and I think that the points in favour of adopting the new code, far outweigh any of the reasons you've given us maybe for not doing so. So certainly, I would certainly agree with your 2 recommendations that we adopt the code with the amended Appendix C. So anyway, I don't know if there are any questions. There certainly don't appear to be. Thank you very much indeed for your verbal report and summarising that very well. Do we have a proposer for the 2 recommendations? You can see are A and B. I would propose to move those together, if that's okay with everybody. Do we have anybody in favour of those 2 recommendations?
Chairman, happy to.
Councillor Fernando, thank you. I've got a proposer and a seconder.
Happy to second.
Oh, thank you, well, Councillor Warburton. Brilliant. So we've got a proposer and a seconder. Those in favour?
We tick, haven't we?
Brilliant. I think we're all done, are we? Yeah, I think we're there, aren't we? We're there. Smashing. Those 2 recommendations those 2 recommendations are passed. Thank you. James, thanks so much indeed for that.
Yep, thank you very much, Chair. Thank you.
Brilliant. So that brings us on to the work programme. So this, Lorraine, is this your?
Yeah, it's me, Chairman. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. This item is, this report is your usual report you get to each meeting. The covering report sets the scene as to why we have the work programme. And if I can take you to the appendix, which starts at page 193, and if you scroll down to that, it shows you what items might be coming, what will be coming forward in May. Well, when I say in May, the May part for audit and government isn't quite populated, but if you move further on looking forward, you'll see that there are a couple of reports that are down for consideration by members. One is one that will be coming from James, which is the standards model code, and a request, I believe it was by you, Chairman, at the coordination of working programmes meeting early March, was on standard issues generally, because you said that we hadn't had one recently. Also to that meeting will be the GDPR and data retention, and as I said, that's programmed for the meeting on the 27th of May. By way of a general update, members might be aware that Overview and Scrutiny Committee will be considering at its meeting on the 23rd of March 2 annual scrutiny reports and a review of scrutiny. The 2 first reports will be going to, as I say, ONS for consideration and then to Council for decision. And the latter report, the review of scrutiny, will be going to the Executive for their consideration. I mentioned that just in the context of, you know, what's going on from a scrutiny viewpoint, even though A&G isn't strictly a scrutiny committee. That's by way of an update. I haven't got any further comments, Chairman, just the report for you to have a look at and comment on.
Thank you. I think it's kind of been said before that a lot of our work is fairly prescribed.
It is.
Fairly, it's almost like a straitjacket, isn't it? We work in, if you want to put it like that. In that we don't have too much wriggle room. We have a bit. I mean, we're almost like polar opposite to ONS. So they've got a huge, great canvas to work on, and we've got a little postage stamp, really, haven't we? Not much rigor. And so, you know, there's not many surprises, are there?
No, there aren't, Chairman.
No, it's all the surprises are ONS, aren't they?
Well, yeah, but as I say, you've got 2 reports coming next time, which I believe there was some mention some time ago that you wanted to see these on a fairly regular basis, i.e. certainly the GDPR and data retention on the yearly basis, and standards as and when they arrive. So, so
I think that's just fine. I think, yeah. I mean, I suspect the answer is no, but is there any work that we could be doing, or reports that we could be seeing, or anything we could be discussing about the capital projects and how they're sort of performing against budget, or do we think with that sort of information is going to come through in the council's sort of budget papers that we see on a regular basis anyway? And I know we've had lots of good discussions about this, and I don't know whether it's practical for this committee to get involved in it.
There were some updates that were provided last November at a members' briefing session on the council's capital projects. Certainly, in terms of performance, that would come within the remit of overview and scrutiny committee. Really haven't got anything else to comment on that. From a regulatory viewpoint, yes, you are quite within your terms of reference to look at anything which, as I said, from a regulatory viewpoint in relation to those major projects that you would like to have a look at, but not in terms of performance or of any decisions which have been currently made.
Okay, so will overview and scrutiny be scrutinising the performance of those projects then? They will be happening.
If a request comes into the chairman by a member or the chairman or a member of the public to look at a particular aspect of those major projects, yes, then the sort of process would then be for that member or person, and we do have a scrutiny page for this on the website, to submit a proposal form, because if somebody wants to have a look at it from a scrutiny viewpoint, then you have to narrow the focus. You have to get to the sort of nitty-gritty of why they want to look at, and not just have a scattergun approach to, well, we just want to look at it. There's got to be a rationale as to why you want to look at it, so that you can provide that focus moving forward.
And maybe, okay, fine. So maybe we could come up with a suggestion for ONS then. If we can.
Good to.
Yeah, maybe as long as it's been looked at. I've long been an advocate of this committee having an involvement in that, but I understand why you're saying if it's a performance issue, then it shouldn't be this committee.
Yeah,
I certainly feel that these projects should be scrutinised. Councillor Stowe, you have a question or a point?
A point, really. I just want to say that we do keep an eye on the major projects through the risk assessment we've spoken about tonight.
Yeah, well, that's true. We do. Yeah.
And so we do actually keep sort of a watching eye that way, don't we?
We do. That's very yeah, absolutely. Yeah, fine. Well, I think we'll just see how things go, and maybe if we want to make a suggestion for ONS, then we can do that. I think if you have something specific for us.
Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you very much indeed, Laurie. Thank you. Okay, so the work programme, it's kind of is what it is. Are there any?
Yeah, it's just to be received, really.
Yeah. Are there any points anyone wants to make before we go? Do we need to vote on this? Sorry, Will. Sorry.
I think they're interested only for really.
Note.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Okay, in which case, then, in the absence of any blue hands, I think we're happy just to note that.
Thank you.
But thanks ever so much. Thank you. Which brings us to urgent items, but I don't believe there are any.
I'm not aware of anything, Chair.
In which case, I think we're done. Thank you very much indeed. It's only 20:38.
Right.
Well done.
Thank you very much indeed for everybody. Thanks for attendance. Thank you.
Bye.